All right, well, good evening, everyone. Thanks for being here. I'm Shelley Gregory with Forge. My pronouns are they, them, or any pronoun. And we're gathering tonight to talk about planning your vote in Wisconsin for the November 2020 election. So, where can we get the information we need? Where do we find these dates? What if we need to know what kind of ID we need to register? What if we need to check whether we've got valid ID for the voter ID law? We're going to take a look at the election protection website. So election protection is also known by and goes by the telephone hotline number, which is super easy to remember and is 866-OUR-VOTE. Election protection has a website for every single state in the country. And if we go to in your state here and click, we can find Wisconsin. So I've already done that. Election protection has just excellent information, everything we need to know, the dates we just went over, and then it gives us advice about finding our polling places, where we vote, how to find our municipal clerks if we need information from their offices. And it's got a lot of information about registering to vote and identification requirements, which are primarily what I want to touch on tonight. Are you all, Michael, are you not seeing my, the screen, the website I'm sharing?
No, you may need to click close share and share again with the browser window that you want.
Thank you.
Thank you.
How's that?
That's perfect.
Great. So we're at the election protection website, as I mentioned, and we're on the Wisconsin state page. The information they've got here about registration is really, really helpful. So they've got a whole set of information about eligibility, which really requires that we're a citizen, that we've lived in Wisconsin for 10 days, that we're 18 years old, and that that we're not someone with a felony conviction who's currently serving a sentence or on probation or parole. We'll talk about that in a bit. Somebody who has a past felony conviction, their rights are automatically restored to vote in Wisconsin, which a lot of people don't know. And so we'll talk about that in a bit. How to register. So we've talked about there's really 3 ways to register. One is same day at the polls, but that of course requires that you're going to go in on election day and vote. The other way is to register online or by mail, and that all has to be done by October 14th, as we just talked about. And of course, you can then also register in person at your clerk's office up until a few days before the election. The real issue with registration and what often trips people up is the identification or the documentary proof that's required to register. And to register, what you're really doing is providing proof of residence. So you are providing proof that you reside somewhere in Wisconsin and that you're going to register at that address. This can be a little confusing because these pieces of documentation are different from what we can use to vote at the polls, and we'll talk about that as well. But for registration, if you have a current and valid driver's license or state ID card, that's your best bet to use that, and that is what you need to register online. If you don't have a current and valid ID or driver's license, if you've got some other form of documentation, you can still register, but you're going to need to do it by mail or in person at the clerk's office or in person on the day of voting. And so there are a lot of other pieces of documents that you can use to register. Other official identification cards or licenses from any Wisconsin governmental body will work. If you've got a municipal ID from the city of Milwaukee, those unfortunately will not work, and they say right on them, may not be used for voting purposes. So that is one ID that you cannot use to register. Other than those kinds of IDs, there are lots of other documents that are listed here that we can use. A real estate tax bill, a college identification card. There are some requirements if you're using a school ID. It has got to be current from within the last 2 years, and we'll talk about that some more as well. But utility bills, bank statements, paychecks, pay stubs, a residential lease, all of those can be used to register for folks who are perhaps don't have housing or who are in facilities at the time they want to register to vote. Intake documents can be used. For people without housing, there are lots of other options here. For people without housing, if folks are working with a social worker or an agency, somebody can fill out a form that indicates that the person is essentially residing at the agency or using the agency as their address, and that's sufficient for registering to vote. So lots of different forms we can use to register to vote. And the other thing we want to look at is identification requirements then. So on the day of voting, if you go to vote in person, you know, Wisconsin has what is considered a pretty strict voter ID law. We have to show photo identification. Again, the easiest way to do that is to use a driver's license or an ID card that's been issued by the state of Wisconsin, a military ID card, or a US passport. Those are some of the best pieces of identification to use. The nice thing about these is that they don't necessarily have to be current. They can be expired as long as they were valid for the past election, and that means November of 2018. So if you've got an ID card that has expired between November 2018 and November 2020, you can still use that to vote. And then there are lots of other ID cards folks may have that we can use as well. Veterans photo ID, identification cards from federally recognized Native American tribes, a driving receipt issued by the DOT. So if you don't yet have a license or an ID, but you've got a receipt, you can use that. Photo ID card from a college or a university, again, as long as it has an expiration date that's within 2 years of the date that it was issued. That's a special requirement for colleges, college IDs. And college IDs will colleges and universities will generally issue students a special ID for voting that complies with this 2-year period so that folks can use that for voting. The other thing we can use to vote is an ID card that the state of Wisconsin is offering simply for the purposes of voting. So if you or someone you know does not have any ID that will be acceptable for voting, they can request an ID card from the Department of Motor Vehicles, and we'll show you how to do that in just a bit. So this is the election protection website. Again, really has all of the information that we need to prepare and that we can use on voting day. Now, I'm going to stop sharing and see if I can pull up another website we want to take a look at. And the website we're going to take a look at is, here we go. So this is myvote.wisconsin.gov, and Michael, I'll ask you to tell me if there's any difficulty in seeing that.
It's perfect.
Great. So at myvote.wisconsin.gov, this is where we really get down to business. We can register, we can request an absentee ballot, we can find out all kinds of information about our voting, where we're voting, who our clerk is, where our polling location is, and we can even see a sample of our ballot. And for those of you who haven't used this website, it's a really powerful website. And again, you know, for this year, for voting safely, if we're able to register and request absentee ballots through this website, this is really going to be one of the safest ways to go in terms of voting. So across the top here are a whole series of things that we can do. We can check our information, everything I just talked about. So let's start with my voter info and see what we can find. This is, these are all from public records. And what I am going to do is, in a very benign manner, pose as our dear governor today, Tony Evers, and just use his name and pull up his voting record based on this public information we have about him, which is essentially just his birthday. So here we are. So Governor Evers is registered to vote. So when we type our name and our birth date into this database, it'll come back right away if we're registered, and it'll tell us that. If we're not registered, it'll come back and say, there's no entry for you. Do you want to register? And you go through the steps that it will show you to register. One of the things you will have to do, and again, this is why you need a Wisconsin driver's license or ID that's current and valid. You will have to upload an image or a photograph of your ID. And the website itself will give you some suggestions about how to best do that. If you're accessing this website on your phone, you can take a quick picture and you can upload it right from your phone. If you're using a digital camera or you're using a cell phone camera and you need to upload it via a website, you just, if you're using your computer, you need to just figure out how to get that photo file onto your computer, which might mean emailing it to yourself, putting it on a flash drive or plugging your phone into your computer and getting that file off of there. And then it's pretty easy to upload it once you've got the file on your computer. And then it'll take you through the steps to register. So once we're registered, this is what our status will look like, and it'll have our current address listed. If your name has changed, if your address is out of date, you can go ahead and update both of those things right here on the My Voter Information page. The other thing this will do then, once it recognizes us, is give all of the information about the upcoming election. So when it is Tuesday, November 3rd, and then it very helpfully shows our polling place, the address, the hours of operation, which is going to be 7 a.m. To 8 p.m. For most people, for most municipalities, but it's always good to check. So that's the polling information. I'm going to skip over my absentee status for a second. And then the other thing this will do is bring up all your voting activity. Again, these are public records about when folks have voted. So that's the information that we get here. Find my polling place. We just took a look at that, but we can put in any street address and it'll pull up a polling place, okay? What's on my ballot is the next section. This is kind of cool because, you know, we can just type in an address and it looks like it ditched our address. So I'm going to try the address of where my office is. Type that in here, and it should come up then and show me the ballot that I'll be looking at if I lived at that address, which is kind of nice. It's a cool way to be able to prepare for going in and voting or for voting absentee. Yeah, so here's my sample ballot for the election, so you know what's on it, who's running, who's contested, who isn't, and you can plan your vote. Also good thing to do to help get you in and out of the polling station a little more quickly, especially right now. Update name or address, we can do that. It's going to take us right back to that other page we looked at. And I see there's a question, or I thought I saw a question about whether folks should update, oh, there we go. Whether folks should update their name if their ID is in a different name. Yes, I think that's a very good thing to do, and it might be necessary. So if you have changed your name on your Wisconsin ID, on your driver's license, on your passport, on whatever it is that you're going to vote with. If you didn't register with that ID, if you registered with an ID in an older name, you do want to update your record here. And you want to do that because this is really what the whole voter ID law is about. When you come into the polls and you show your ID, the poll worker's got a book in front of them. And it's got your name and your address on it, and they're making sure that your ID says that you're the person you say you are, and that ID matches what's in what's called their poll book. So if you've got an ID that you've changed since you last voted or since you registered, I would say yes, get your name updated now, so that it's updated in the poll book, and when you roll in with your nice new shiny ID, they'll have your name in the poll book the right way. Okay, so the other thing we can do here is, again, register to vote. And unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to walk us through registering to vote because I am registered to vote. What I will do is give you a sense of what this website looks like. So I will enter the name and birthday of our governor to the south in Illinois, J.B. Pritzker, who I'm pretty sure shouldn't be registered to vote in Wisconsin. And so sure enough, when we enter that, it comes back and says there's no record. And then right here, we can just hit the button to register to vote. And the website will walk us through all of these steps. So the first thing it does is tell us what we're going to need to do to register online. And if we're not able to do that, it tells us how to register through the mail. And then it'll just walk us through all of these steps. It'll ask some questions about your citizenship, your residency. You'll give your name, your address. You will certify that that information is true. You'll upload your ID, and you'll be good to go. Once you're registered, so once a voter is registered in Wisconsin, then we can ask for an absentee ballot, and you can do all of this again right through this website. So let's go back and put in a voter from Wisconsin who we know is registered. And we'll go back to see Governor Evers' registration. So again, he's registered, and he has already requested an absentee ballot. Had he not, this button right here would say absentee ballot request. And again, Governor Evers has dutifully requested his ballot and has completed it, and it's been received by his clerk's office. If that were not the case, there would be a button here to take us through the process of requesting an absentee ballot. And again, if we don't already have acceptable ID on file, we'll be asked to upload a photo ID just like we are when we register. If you're registered and if you have a photo ID on file, that will say that here. You just press a button to request your absentee ballot, and then you can come back and you can track that request for your absentee ballot here. So you'll know that the clerk has received the request, that the clerk is preparing your ballot, that the ballot's been sent out to you. And once you return it, then you will see that that ballot has come back to your clerk's office. And that's a really nice thing to check. I recommend checking it. Really gives you peace of mind that your absentee ballot is back in the hands of your clerk. And again, over here, this information is always over here on the left-hand side, information about who your municipal clerk is. So right now we're looking at someone who's registered in Madison, Village of Maple Bluff, apparently. And so we can email the clerk or we can call the clerk. The clerk's office is going to be where you go for anything you need, whether it's checking your registration if you can't do it online, or whether it's requesting an absentee ballot, or like in my case, my absentee ballot requests have gotten lost in this system for some reason. And I can't explain that, but when that happens, what I do is I call the clerk's office in Milwaukee as soon as I realize there's a problem, and let them know, and then they send an absentee ballot out. So, you know, if you've already requested your absentee ballot, if you requested it back in April for the whole year, I definitely recommend just popping back in myvote.wisconsin.gov and making sure that your request is still there and still being processed. And if it isn't, you know, give yourself some time so you can call your clerk's office and get a new ballot sent out to you. So that's the myvote.wisconsin.gov website.